Welcome to the Evangelism Podcast. I'm Daniel King, and I'm excited about telling people about Jesus. Today I have a very special guest with me, Andreas Cucca. Did I say that right?
Yeah, about as good as it gets. Cucca, yeah.
All right, so you are a pastor in Sweden, and you also have a great heart for evangelism. Tell me a little bit about all the things that you're involved in.
Well, I'm a local church pastor, and I work with missions among unreached people groups in different countries. But my main focus has been Bangladesh for the last 15 years. Besides from pastoring, I've been doing different kind of secular jobs, working in church planting, and so on. But now I'm a local church pastor since 6 years, and doing missions with my wife and my family. Several times a year, we go out to different mission fields.
Tell me about the context of the ministry that you're doing in Sweden. Your church is in a small village.
Yeah, it's a small village of about 800 people. 2,000 in the surrounding area. We're an old Pentecostal church, over 100 years old. And I would say when I came, my wife is brought up in that church. I've been part of the church for 12 years. I came on board as a pastor 6 years ago. And I would say we were quite an introverted church, and also, I would say, dying church. We didn't reach people. But little by little, we are seeing people coming to the Lord. And we've seen a lot of increase in immigrants coming to our church, which is wonderful. So it's a small village. We win one person at a time.
Talk to me about the challenges of doing evangelism in Sweden. You're gifted as an evangelist, and so as an evangelist, you're always looking for opportunities to lead people to Jesus. But the ground in Sweden, sometimes it can be very difficult.
Yeah, it is difficult sometimes, but I believe that the gospel has power to change anyone in any situation. So I would say our mindset as a church is a bigger obstacle than secularism or whatever you can throw at Sweden. I think our mindset, we've been stoked in a mindset that Swedish people are secular and so on. But if you just share the gospel, people are open to listen. And I think it's changed also after COVID, we've seen an increase in interest in spiritual matters also. Some years ago, I would say it was harder. I think it's easy to share the gospel if you do it.
And you have a motto that's on your hat right now.
Yeah.
It says, open home, open heart, open heaven. What does that mean?
That means it's from our family. Actually, we had this. We say we want to live. Our house should be an open home, a home for people who don't have any home or like rootless. Open heart towards God, of course. They would be open to what God is saying, but also open to our society and to the people around us. And we believe that God has opened heaven 2,000 years ago. When he died on the cross, it says that the veil was broken. So we believe that miracles can happen, that people can be changed through the gospel. And since I came on board as a church pastor, this has also become our vision for our church, that your church should be a home for people who have no home, an open home, filled with people with open hearts towards God and our society, and that believe in an open heaven, that everyone can be transformed by the gospel of Jesus. So that's the main focus. And I believe it correlates. If you have an open home, if you're welcoming, if you have openness towards people can come into the presence of Jesus, and then they can experience the open heaven. So I think you have to have all parts.
In recent years, many immigrants have come to Sweden.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit controversial because Swedes are very proud of their culture, very proud of their country, their language, and now all these people are coming. And Sweden has been very welcoming to them, but it's also been a challenge. But talk to me about how your church is responding to the challenge of immigrants, and then what you're doing to reach out to them and what God is doing.
One part is, politics aside, as a church, we have always, the Bible says, that we should welcome the immigrants, regardless of our political stance. The ones that are coming, we need to embrace. And we've said we want to be a place for all nations, for all peoples. And this open home I think some of our new Swedes or immigrants, they have experienced that. They've actually said to me, some people from Congo came some years ago. They had 70 people from all over the world, Afghanistan, Eritrea, Congo, Syria, came to our small village. There was 30 apartments being built for people that arrived and have had a not a citizenship, but that they could stay in Sweden. And that was a controversial thing in our village, because a lot of people are outright racist, and some are very hesitant. So we as a church and did a news, like the local paper in the bigger town in our area did an open home at the pastors, and we're very happy. This is a good thing for our village. And from that we got some hate mails and so on. But I mean, the people from abroad, they love our church, because our church has responded very well. I'm proud of my church members, old church members, younger church members. They've embraced the new people coming in, and there's been a change in culture, I would say. So now maybe half of our church is African, and some people come from Afghanistan. Sometimes we've seen Muslims come to the Lord. We've seen secular Swedish coming to the Lord, and so on. So I'm happy to see that there can be life in an old 100-year-old church.
I think the church needs to recognize the significance of this opportunity that God is giving us. Before, people would have to go to the mission field.
Yeah.
Now the mission field is coming to us, and we have an opportunity to reach them for Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, we did like a big outreach. We handed out like 700 magazines with testimonies. My testimonies and Sadawan's testimonies about how we met Jesus. And we invited them to a day outside of our church. We had jumping castles for the kids. We had a big kids meeting with about 60 to 80 kids. At the most, we're about 150 people outside of our church. That many of them have never stepped foot in our church. And when we handed out 200 hamburgers. But most importantly, we shared the gospel, testimonies, some music. A known singer, she won Sweden's Got Talent. She is a on fire believer, so she shared her testimony and some songs. And then we had a preacher, Evangelist, preached and did an altar call, and 3 girls from Afghanistan raised their hands and said, "We want Jesus." Their mother got healed in her neck. They're not disciples yet, but they are leaning in towards our church and coming sometimes and so on. So it was a big thing for us. And actually a Swedish guy just came right into our church from that meeting. He said, "Because you were so open, I want to come. Because you opened up, you sent out the magazine, you did it publicly, you preached the gospel outside of your church." And during the pandemic, he had read the Bible, and now he's come to a saving faith in Jesus. So every now and then he comes to my office. He works from home, so he comes to my office sometimes, just has some questions. And so next week we'll start a new course for new believers and people that are interested in the gospel.
This testimony of these 3 Afghan girls really moves me. My parents lived in Kabul, Afghanistan for the last 12 years. And now we have many Afghan refugees that have come to my hometown in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We have about 900 that are there. And so we've been helping them to get driver's license and to find housing and to have food. We've been helping them get in English classes, and even some of them have been given scholarships to some of the different colleges. And so we've been very involved in helping the Afghans that have come. And at Christmas time, we had 11 Afghans come over to our house for a Christmas dinner.
Wonderful.
And we sang Christmas carols, talked about the Christmas story from both the Bible and from the Quran, because the Quran talks about how Isa was conceived by Miriam. And so at least that gives you a starting point to talk about Jesus. And we gave them all Christmas presents and had a wonderful time with them. And so we have a great heart for the Afghans that are the diaspora that are now scattered all over the world. All right, you mentioned your testimony in the magazine.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your testimony.
Yeah, man, I'm brought up in a secular home in Sweden. I have no relationship with church so much. I had Christian friends, but I mean, I was 13, 14. We began to go out partying, drinking, Some of my friends became criminals, or picking cell phones and robbing people and so on. And I was on the outskirts of that gang or whatever. And I felt so empty on the inside, and I began to think about my life. And is this everything? School, weekend partying, then job, or university and the job, family, working, weekend. Is there nothing more? And I fell into a deep depression, and I began to contemplate about taking my life. And one time I was arguing with my mother because there's no one that gets on my nerves so much as my mother. I love her to death, but she can really drive me crazy. It's my wife, not my wife, my mother, my brother, and my 8-year-old daughter. They really know how to push the buttons, and my mother did it at the time. And she, I'm not sure what she said, but I said, "Do you want me to kill myself?" And the words that came out of my mouth, it became like it just came back to me, and it just became like a cover over my heart and over my mind. And it was like a bondage that just happened there. And after that, it was everything that's just contemplated in my mind. And at the same time, I had a friend who invited me to church in the same right time. And he invited me to a Lutheran church first, and they had some friends in a Pentecostal church. They had youth meetings, and there I saw something that I didn't see in my other friends. I saw light in their eyes, I saw joy, I saw peace. And I began to go to this charismatic Pentecostal church where they raised their hands and they sang about Jesus, talked about Jesus. And it's weird. It was a weird thing because it was so out of my regular life. It was nothing that I had seen before. But I felt at peace there, so I continued to go there, and I stopped partying. And then I went to a youth camp, and that night I said to my friend, his name is Gustav, I said, "Gustav, we need to get saved." I'm not sure if he was born again or not, but if he was not, he came with me, and we prayed a prayer of salvation with the youth pastor. And during that prayer, I didn't know what to do with my hands, lift my hands, so many things to do in church. And I was really new, but I just did like this with my hands, and I closed my eyes, and he prayed, and I repeated the prayer. And as I repeated, as I thanked you, Jesus, forgive my sins, and thank you that you took my sins and you took my darkness and so on. And as I prayed this prayer, and I was closing my eyes, it was like there was two beams from a big truck just hit, they're flooding my face. It was dark in the room. It was like in the evening time, and it was, but still it was like a big light just flashing in my eyes, even when I was closing my eyes. And it was like a peace that came over me, and the lid on my heart and the bondage, in my head it just went away. It washed away in 1 second, and I stood there for 10 minutes, and I just knew. It was not just me and the youth pastor there. Someone was there. And I said to the youth pastor, "He was here." And he was like, yeah, cool down. And I was like, how can you be cool down if God in heaven is in the room? So from that time, I'm just always filled with peace. A couple of weeks later, I realized I am not have any suicidal thoughts. From that time, I just began to share about Jesus. When I came home from the camp, I said to my mother, "Mother, I'm saved now." And she was really, really touched. 5 years later, she got baptized. I actually baptized her in our church. From that time, it's only been evangelism for me, and to share the gospel, because Jesus really, he took me from darkness to light. And I believe he can do it for anyone.
Amen. What a beautiful testimony. Let's talk about Bangladesh. You've been working there about 15 years now. What have you seen God do in that nation?
Well, I've seen people getting their lives transformed. I remember one girl, her name was Sarola. She came to our campaign. Was maybe 6,000 people there. She saw testimonies of healings. One girl had a cancer tumor that was visible in the back that just shrunk away. And she saw a lot of these kind of things. And she heard the gospel, and she didn't receive her healing. So for 3 days, she was in the crowd. And on the way back, the message hit her. Because she prayed, "Jesus, why am I not healed?" And then she just prayed, "Jesus, forgive me of my sins." And at that time, she saw a vision of Jesus hanging on the cross. Says, "My daughter, I see you, I forgive you, and I healed you." And then she says, "I felt so light on the inside," and her knee that was broken got healed. And then she came back and testified. And I mean, and this is one of thousands, tens of thousands of people have received Jesus, and hundreds of churches has been planted during the years. In that movement, we're working with their church planting movement. In the last years, we've seen several hundred churches. Now it's 468 churches at the moment. The statistics say 468. But I mean, it's a movement of people receiving Jesus and an openness to the gospel, both Hindus and Muslims.
Talk to me about the strategy of this church planting movement. How does it work?
I mean, we have had, we do campaigns, gospel outreaches, open air campaigns, preaching the gospel, praying for the sick, and from that, churches are planted. So, for example, if they want to plant a church in, say, 3 different places, well, we pick a spot in between those places, we do a campaign, and we bring people from 3 different villages or different areas into the campaign. We preach the gospel to them, they receive Jesus, and then they go back to their villages, and they will send out church planters to that places. So every time we do a campaign, we do it in a strategic place, so we can start 3 to 4 churches every time. So it's every time it's about where do they want to start churches, and where is it possible to do it, and then we do it. So the campaigns is not something we do just for the sake of it. We do it as a kickstart for church planting.
And so over the years that you and ACE, the Association of Campaign Evangelists, have been working in Bangladesh, how many campaigns have you done?
Oh, I'm not sure. Probably in the 60 plus at least. But I mean,
and so these are not all in the same place or in the big cities. You're going town to town, village to village.
Yeah, I mean, there can be really, really small places. And I mean, we're in a small town, village, and there were about 5,000 in the village. And at the campaign, we had 5,000 people. So everybody came. And I mean,
that's a good campaign.
Yeah.
If you get 100% of the population to come, that's massive.
Yeah, and I mean, in one direction we had one mosque, in one direction we had another mosque. So when we came to that village, they said, "Are you from Egypt?" Because they thought that we were from Egypt because they've been financing mosques there. But a lot of people came to the Lord in that place. It's called Fulbari. And there's other places also. We preached outside of, quite close to the mosques, and people are happy to receive the gospel. But we were both, I mean, mostly in the outskirts, in the bush areas, in the smaller villages, not so much in the big cities. It's first and foremost, it's harder to do in the bigger towns, and also there are churches in the bigger towns, so we don't need to do it there. We do it where it's needed.
So you have a calling on your life to be an evangelist. You're also serving as a pastor. How do you balance these 2 different callings and the needs of both?
I don't. Or is it, I think it flows into each other, because before I was the pastor of our church, we were the church missionaries, me and my wife. And I would say that the things I do, because I believe in the local church, so I'm sent out by my church as a missionary. So everything that I do out from my local church. But of course, time-wise, I have to plan a little bit, so I'm not away too much, because I need to tend to my sheep at home. But I mean, it's manageable, and I think to be a local church pastor helps me to be a good missionary, and to be to be a missionary evangelist helps me to become a good pastor, because we need both. We need to do the outreach. We need to take care of people, and I think when I talk to church leaders in Bangladesh, for example, I know their struggles. I know how it is to help people, and when people come with their problems, and so I think it's good. It's good to be both pastor and evangelist.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being on the Evangelism Podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. It's an honor. And just want to say to the people listening that, I mean, if you have a calling on your life, run with it. There are so many people. Bangladesh is open, and many places are open for the gospel. So I would just encourage, if you feel encouraged by this, reach out to Daniel, and he will probably help you in the right direction.
Amen. I want to go to Bangladesh now, hearing about all the testimonies of what God has done there. It's so wonderful. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you, Daniel.
Daniel King is on a mission to save 1 million souls a year, but he can't do it alone. Would you consider sowing a financial seed today? To give, please visit www.kingministries.com.